All right, can you see and hear me okay now? I just turned the camera back on and hopefully the picture will come up. All right, can you see and hear me okay now? I just turned. Should be all right. 1969 moon computers, Andy says. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for your patience. All right. You know, it's always wonderful as you're just trying to go live and the whole software system freezes up on you and have to rebuild all your connections. Plus, I have a number of people that I invite through email who are not patrons that I personally send the link to. So it's all rebuilding. Okay, without further ado, we are going to be speaking about something that I covered back in 2017, and that is, I'm going to put this back up on the screen, the city of Neom. This is in Saudi Arabia. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard about, read about, perhaps even heard about it from me back in 2017. But I thought I would do an update because this has a tie to the third temple of all things. Okay? This Abrahamic faith initiative that was just signed between the United Arab Emirates, which is not Saudi Arabia, of course, but I'm just saying that just for the sake of saying it, is precipitating further agreements by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to his own statements over the last couple of days, that he is now entering into discussions with other Middle Eastern nations to join in, if you will, in this Abrahamic faith initiative. Now, this is nothing new. Obviously, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has probably continuing conversations with the surrounding countries, nations. In the Bible, they speak of compassing Israel. And this plays into Ezekiel 38 and 39 further down the road. There are two concentric circles surrounding Israel. The inner circle of countries that border Israel, and then an outer circle of countries surrounding. And it is that second one, the outer circle of countries that are compassing Israel, that brings in the discussion of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Which is not our focus tonight. Tonight is to look not necessarily at the United Arab Emirates and their signatory to this initiative, but to go next door, so to speak, to Saudi Arabia and look at Neom. Neom is at the southern tip of Israel. I'll put that up on the map just to get us oriented, and then we're going to come back to these graphics later on. Lower right corner, you will see the United Arab Emirates on the coast of the Persian Gulf, very much part of the Strait of Hormuz and that area there. And then, of course, you go to the north, there's Kuwait, which is not really a friend of Israel, which is interesting. And then further off to the west, in the northwest here, we have the red circle signifying the location of Neom. Okay, and that's at the southern tip of Israel. That gets us oriented. Here's a close-up of the region that we're speaking of here, and this is really just a barren desert sand area, but it is inhabited, and it is inhabited by some 20,000 tribesmen. And you'll know that the Middle East typically is made up of tribes, especially Saudi Arabia. This is the Al-Huwait tribe, numbering some 20,000 people that are being displaced by the Prince of Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, essentially a dictatorship, and they're being displaced as well as, in some cases, being murdered. So not as all well and rosy with this area that they're trying to set aside in the desert, which is here, obviously, the Red Sea, and then we also have coming up here the Gulf of Oman and Israel itself. And then Neom is supposed to be a new city, new modern city. This is an artist's rendition of it, if you will. And tying into all of this, I'm just giving you the heads up where we're going. This is the Gulf of Aqaba right here that we're talking about. Here's Neom, where the name of Saudi Arabia is located on the map. And then, of course, the Gulf of Suez and the Suez Canal going up here. What I'm going to take you to is the now frozen railway, high-speed railway that I introduced to you in 2017. This project has now been shelved, but I want to tie that to China. Okay? We are going to be talking about the Silk Road, which is now labeled as the China Belt Road. All of these factor in together, and that's where we're headed tonight. So let us come all the way back to our selection of scriptures. And we've made reference to these several times, but let's just go right ahead, start with Psalm 37:13. And I won't read too much scripture this evening as I did on the previous live stream on Thursday. We're going to pretty much stick to the politics tonight. But Psalm 37 verse 13, but the Lord laughs, seeing that their day is coming. So let's back up just a little bit to put this in context. Again, this is very familiar scripture in the context of the modern day. And if I can get my computer to cooperate, which it's not doing, so let me just read what I have on the screen. Verse 12, the wicked scheme against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs, seeing that their day is coming. The wicked have drawn the sword and bent the bow to bring down the poor and needy. And now my computer finally has cooperated. This is going to be a struggle tonight. The wicked have drawn the sword and bent the bow to bring down the poor and needy, to slay those whose ways are upright. But their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. This is in some translations, the Lord laughing is the Lord laughing in derision. And I love that. I love that word. Let's go to Psalm 2, verse 4. The triumphant Messiah. Let us break their chains and cast away their cords. The one enthroned in the heavens laughs. The Lord taunts them. That's the derision, okay? Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his fury. So these guys, they can have their plans for their city of Neom and their Abrahamic faith initiative and their Zionist agenda for the forming of the new Levant. And by the way, the Levant, the ancient borders of Israel, the Promised Land, factors into this discussion of this Abrahamic faith initiative, because what has also been put on the table is the annexation of Judea and Samarian lands. Now, this is where the evangelical church in America has fallen down on its mission, so to speak, for Israel in support of the Zionist agenda of Israel. So we're seeing tonight a theme of plans that are falling apart. The evangelical church has, through Mike Adams and others like him, some 7 million strong, apparently, in the U.S., were challenged by Mike Adams and other leaders in the evangelical movement to bring about, through Benjamin Netanyahu, the annexation of Judea and Samaria, to further expand the territory of the Zionist political control of the region. According to Benjamin Netanyahu, that's been set aside for now. It's been postponed. It's not taken off the table, as the Prime Minister and also the ambassador from Israel to the United States indicated. So it's not dead in the water, but it's being postponed. We're flying on Patch Airlines tonight, just to kind of joke around a little bit, this time at 50,000 feet, because we're going to circle the globe. It is a sphere. It is not a flat Earth. And we're really going to look at the big picture perspective tonight. We're bringing in China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, United States, and really the world in totality by way of the former Chinese Silk Road and now the Belt Road Initiative. So let's go to Proverbs 19:21 just to finish this out. Listen to the counsel and accept discipline, that you may be wise the rest of your days. Many plans are in a man's heart, but the purpose of the Lord will prevail. Okay? And that's an often repeated statement here in these live streams. It's all according to God's plan. There's nothing that happens outside of God's plans. But we're examining these plans that God is laughing at this evening. Let's start with Neom. Let's get a little perspective on that. Let's go back a little bit, and then we'll move on to China's Belt Road Initiative. But underscoring all of this is what has just happened in Israel, because this Abrahamic Faith Initiative is not so much a Daniel 9:27 covenant with the many. That's coming. That comes with the Antichrist once he's been revealed. But this is a stepping stone in that direction, because it's a stepping stone towards bringing the three religions together: Islam, Christendom, and Judaism, to bring the three together. And so we see the political agreements being formed, but tied under the umbrella, tied to the faith. There's no separation of church and state going on here. The faith, however, in this particular agreement, this faith initiative, is the tool. The faith is being used as the banner to bring politically the nations together of Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And Benjamin Netanyahu is courting the other Arab nations to likewise follow this merging of the three religions, but to serve not so much a religious or a faith-based agenda or purpose, but more of a Zionist political agenda, which is for Zionist control, not just of the Levant territories, but all of the Middle East. Remember the Ottoman Empire and Turkey. This is what Erdogan from Turkey is trying to rebuild and reinstitute politically, is the Ottoman Empire, which moves down through Israel and on into Egypt, the Ottoman Empire. At the same time, we have Israel, who's trying to set up control of the entire Middle East, with the U.S., of course, fully supporting this. The Middle East is under the control of the U.S. and the Israelis in their picture, in their plan. And it is that plan for domination that flies in the face of not only Turkey and the Ottoman Empire discussion, but it also flies in the face of the Chinese and the Russians. The Russians are fully supporting the Chinese efforts to build the former Silk Road, the new Belt Road Initiative, which we're going to get into later on. So you have these power struggles going on between significantly large players. I would say Turkey is probably the weakest of all these players by a long shot, but nonetheless is in the mix. So from 50,000 feet, we are seeing the Chinese building their trade routes for the purpose by 2049. 2049 will be the 100th anniversary of the present Chinese Communist party. They have a 100-year vision, and I've shared with you this in the past when we talked about China and the Chinese economics system. Their vision is world domination, absolute Chinese control, world domination, and they make no bones about this. It's in the wide open by 2049. So they are building out an infrastructure in this Belt Road Initiative, while at the same time we have Turkey trying to build out a gas pipeline infrastructure to build out their Ottoman Empire. And then we also have Israel with the Levant. So there's a lot going on that is historically based, okay? And there's a lot, certainly, that is faith-based. Now, I said that the bringing of the joining of the three religions is being used as a tool. It is a point of leverage for Israel, for the Zionist agenda. Because like the Chinese, the Zionists believe that they should be in full control, full domination of the planet. Okay? This is why the U.S. is backing Israel. Because the U.S. with Israel wants to dominate and control the entire planet. So from our perspective, we are able to see a much bigger picture without getting bogged down in the details, bogged down in things like Black Lives Matters and the rioting in the streets in the U.S. and the political divisions going on and the upcoming presidential election. But on that note, this Abrahamic Faith Initiative is really much ado about nothing, because the agreements under that initiative between the United Arab Emirates and Israel have already been in action. They already have diplomatic relationships, basically full diplomatic relationships. They have free trade. They have tourism. The only thing that really is in the public domain missing is the joining of the religions, insofar as the Temple Mount is concerned. And the Temple Mount is the real focal point here. It is the building of the third temple. The purpose of the Abrahamic Faith Initiative was to bolster President Trump's prospects for re-election. He needed a win. He needed something that he could put out there as a feather in his cap and be able to say, look what we've accomplished. We are bringing the Arabs and the Israelis together. There will be peace in the land. This is a peace initiative, according to President Trump, as much as it is a faith-based initiative. But if you look at the map here, and I'm going to put it back up for you to take a look at. This is a very tiny country, the UAE, especially in comparison to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the next one that Israel is going to join with. You can watch for that. The next country that is going to join this initiative will be Saudi Arabia. That will be President Trump's next feather in his cap to further his ability to get reelected. So watch for that. The last one will be Kuwait. Kuwait hates Israel, and yet Kuwait, we in the Gulf War saved Kuwait, didn't we? The United States, the coalition forces, which included Israeli forces, to liberate Kuwait. But the Kuwaitis today, they hate Israel. So they'll be the last. But this whole movement towards Israel by the Arab nations is ultimately faith-based. I said that faith was being used as a tool, predominantly the tool of re-electing President Trump, so that the present administration financially can continue to support the Netanyahu administration, who is under indictment, as you know. He is under personal indictment. And so this is to prop up two leaders, this faith-based initiative. It's being used initially as a tool in the present time to further a political agenda, but then it is going to come back as a faith issue in the form of the building of the third temple. Because ultimately this is spiritual. Ultimately this is about joining the religions for the purpose of worshiping the Antichrist, worshiping the beast. Whether we're talking China, Turkey, Israel, US, or any of the Arab nations, whether we're talking about Africa and Egypt, Libya, or we're talking about the greater European countries, and we can't forget about India and Australia, New Zealand, all of the countries of the world will pull together under the Antichrist one world government and one world religion. So the religions right now in the present day are being pulled together. Israel's the center point of this pulling together of the religions, so that all countries then are drawn in politically to form the one world government in addition to the one world religion, under the one world leader, the Antichrist, worshiping the image of the first beast. So I'm showing you the stepping stones, and in the mix here is the third temple. So I said I would talk about Neom. Let's go there. Let's talk about Neom. Let's put it on the map. Let me read a little bit of background for you on that. I won't get too deep into it. I want us to focus on the temple. Keep that in the back of your thoughts as I go through some of this information. This comes to us by way of theguardian.com. I want to thank Mr. Wilson for sending this to me just before we went live. I have a couple of others that I'm going to share some excerpts from. The title of this, and this is dated May 4th of this year, "It's being built," that's Neom, "it's being built on our blood," is the quote. "The true cost of Saudi Arabia's $500 billion megacity." With an artificial moon and flying taxis, Neom has been billed as humanity's next chapter. But beneath the glitzy veneer lies a story of threats, forced eviction, and bloodshed. Now, from the Neom website, they're quoting, "The future has a new home. It's a virgin area that has lots of beauty," says the voiceover on the video, the promotional video. And they have tracks of color-tinted panoramic shots of picturesque desert expanses and deep azure lagoons. "Better humans, better society," it boasts extravagantly. The brainchild of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the new city-state of Neom, named from a combination of the Greek word for new and the Arabic term for future, it is intended to cover an area the size of Belgium at the far north of Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coastline. There's been no shortage of outlandish promises for the $500 billion city-state. According to strategy documents leaked last year, the project may include a huge artificial moon, glow-in-the-dark beaches, flying drone-powered taxis, robotic butlers to clean the homes of residents, and a Jurassic Park-style attraction featuring animatronic lizards. All right, so that's an excerpt. I won't, because of copyright issues, really get into too much of this article. Let me just give you my paraphrasing from back in 2017. What we had at that time was this glitzy promotion of this new city-state. As you can see, right on the coast, carved out of the desert. But this is for the elite. This is for the wealthy of the world. This is billed as the ultimate smart city. Back in 2017, when I first brought this to your attention, they were talking about everything in this city being connected by way of the internet. Now we're talking by way of the blockchain system. But there's no room for the poor here. There's no room for the destitute. As I said in the beginning, the Al-Huwaydis, 20,000 tribesmen, have been evicted from their lands. Some have been slaughtered and martyred. There have been military forces that have come in and explosively destroyed their homes, their settlements. And there's no financial compensation being offered. There are no lands being offered for them when they are displaced. No homes, no settlements. They're just being flat out kicked out for the elite. That's the dark underbelly to this. And even more insidious when we start talking about the smart city aspects of this, there's no privacy. You see, these elite, wealthy that are being lured into taking up residence in Neom have very little awareness of the fact that 24/7 they will be monitored by AI systems. Oh, they look at the conveniences and they look at the robots and they look at the theaters and they look at the entertainment. They look at all of the leisure activities, but it all comes at a price. And that's your liberty. Okay? This is their version of utopia that they're trying to build. But because of the outcry on the international scene of these human rights violations, that is slowing down financial investment from outside. Certainly, this is being built with proceeds from the sale of oil. But all of the Arab nations, all of the oil-producing nations, including the United States, are suffering from extremely depressed oil prices and have been since this whole COVID-19 issue came up, this manufactured pandemic, this plandemic. So financially, because of a major reduction in oil revenues, but also international investors looking at the human rights issues, number one, and saying, wait a second, we don't know if we really want to be involved in this. We don't want blood on our hands. That's a public relations issue for investors. But going even deeper, as we always do, deeper into the dark underbelly of Neom, what we are looking at here are a society, a city, a new city-state that is run under the aegis of Sharia law. And all of the legal system is tied to the prince himself. This is a dictatorship that the wealthy, that the elite are being lured into, and investors are being lured to. This is akin to investing in China, but on a much smaller scale. But this is inviting those from other nations to take up full-time permanent residence, to actually become a citizen of Neom, but answering to the prince, answering to a dictator. Again, giving up their liberties. So many are balking at the idea of living under a dictator. Some of them have been wise enough to see this. Some of them don't like Sharia law. So their plans, which is the theme for this evening, are falling apart. And back in 2017 and going forward to the present time, at least up until the COVID-19 pandemic hit, they were full speed ahead. They thought their plans would come to fruition for a new utopia, for, if you will, a Garden of Eden. But that's fallen flat on its face. So I wanted to share with you the human rights issue briefly, the Sharia law issue, and the dictatorship issue, so that you have some sense of what is going on here. I don't think that their plans will be completed. I do not think that Neom is going to achieve the goals that they envisioned. I think they started a little too late, because the Antichrist is about to come on the scene. And yes, the Antichrist would like to see something like this and take credit for it, but it's not going to happen. There will not be this prosperity that they envision. Once the Holy Spirit, once the restrainer is removed, literally it is going to be hell on earth. Literal. That is a literal statement. Hell on earth. So their Garden of Eden plans are not going to happen. Now, if you look at my t-shirt, let me turn this camera down a little bit. See my t-shirt, Live Free or Die, New Hampshire? I take that literally. Live free or die. Many people in this state do take it literally. This is a gift from my wonderful wife, Kathleen, who's in the chat room with you tonight. I want to leave these scriptures up for you just for a moment, make a transition over to China. I didn't want to belabor the point too much on Neom, even though that's the title of our live stream, but probably very few of us have heard very much about Neom in the last year or so, especially because COVID-19 is overshadowing it. But I bring that to your attention because it's close proximity to Israel. And I think we should go back to the map for this. I think I have a close-up. Because we're going to talk about Israel for a moment, and then we are going to go to China and the Silk Road. Likewise, back in 2017, I said to you when I was introducing Neom, I was also introducing to you a high-speed rail project, another plan that has been shelved. So we have Neom basically on the rocks, and then we have, as of mid-2019, this high-speed rail project, which extends from the south, the southern tip of Israel, at Eilat. We have in the Gulf of Aqaba here, which if you come down a little further from on the map to Saudi Arabia, where it's printed on the map, that's Neom, as I pointed out earlier. Coming up through the Gulf of Aqaba to Israel itself was a starting point, a terminus for a high-speed rail. And Israel already spent millions of dollars down here in Aqaba specifically, and, Eilat, building a new port for the Chinese, for ships to come in, offload to this high-speed rail line, which was going to initially be for cargo and then for passenger service. So you can see on the map it extends up through basically what I like to call the spine, the central spine of Israel, through the Negev, through Beersheba, out to the coast at Ashdod, through Tel Aviv, and on up to Haifa. Now, Haifa was going to be for the freight to be shipped to Europe. Tel Aviv was primarily for the tourist industry, to provide that movement of people between Tel Aviv and Neom. So there's a connection right there. This high-speed rail system, which they are calling the Med-Red Railway, was financed by China. China in Israel proper, okay? And moving up to Haifa, this would have connected, had they built this system, from Haifa would have connected to China's Belt Road Initiative, okay? So I'm stringing these pearls together for you to show you the connections. This is why I'm saying that Saudi Arabia, even though the plans for Neom are falling on their face, Saudi Arabia will be the next, I think, will be the next to sign a faith-based initiative, as did the UAE. Saudi Arabia is going to come in and join hands with Israel, again, for the purpose of propping up President Trump's re-election efforts, okay? That will be seen by him and touted by him as a win. Well, Saudi Arabia has been a long-standing ally of the United States. They've had their squabbles with Israel, but they have diplomatic relationships, they have trade relationships. They were in full support of building this high-speed rail line because it would benefit them in their trade with Israel. Now, it'll be touted as another huge win, but it's nothing more than just putting a label on something that already exists, as it did with the United Arab Emirates and Israel. This is all just political theater. Again, it is not the Daniel 9:27 covenant, the covenant with many. That's the Antichrist covenant. But this is a stepping stone in that direction. Tied in with this, again, is the third temple, and we'll get to that after we talk about China. I have discussed with you and asked you to please pay attention to Cyprus, Turkey, Egypt, Libya, Lebanon, and Israel, and the United States, of course, and Greece. Because of the natural gas pipeline agreements between Israel and Greece to deliver natural gas to Europe for sale. And then we have Turkey with Egypt, Libya, to likewise transport natural gas through a seabed-based pipeline to Europe for sale through Istanbul, bypassing Greece, cutting out Israel, but sharing in that economic exclusion zone area where they are having a conflict at this point. Here's what I shared with you, I think it was last Thursday. We have this overlap of these two economic exclusion zone areas. This is the point of conflict just off of Cyprus. This is just to the west of Cyprus, between Cyprus and Greece. Okay? This, in my estimation, is one of two matches that has been lit. Okay? The other was the explosion in Beirut, Lebanon. The regime change that took place last Monday was precipitated by Israel, because the Lebanese, some 15 years ago, the Lebanese government at that time signed an agreement, a memorandum of understanding with Israel, Lebanon and Israel, for the purpose of delivering natural gas to Europe, Israel's natural gas. Since then, Libya had a regime change again, where many Hezbollah leaders were in the cabinet, the Lebanese cabinet. They since have left, but there are still other players from Hezbollah within the government of Lebanon. that, of course, are anti-Israel. But Israel is drawing Lebanon by way of a new administration friendly to Israel that will be in place very soon. And once that new administration that is friendly to Israel is in place, Israel will be pushing even harder through this economic exclusion zone to lay this seabed natural gas pipeline from the Leviathan Basin, which you see on the right-hand side of your screen, to Cyprus to a pumping station, and then from Cyprus to Greece and on out to Europe. That's a flashpoint, folks. That's a match that's been lit. Both of these events, the explosion in Beirut, the overlap of the exclusion zones, and thereby the conflict between Turkey and Israel, is another match that has been lit. Remember, Turkey is a member of NATO. However, they are politically and economically backed by Russia. And Russia is politically and economically supporting China's Belt Road Initiative. This is going to come to a head in Damascus. Jeremiah 49, Isaiah 17. Watch Lebanon. Watch Beirut. Watch the regime change in Lebanon. Because that affects Syria. That affects Damascus. Politically, Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump are trying to shore up Arab support. Yes, to build a third temple, but politically to build support to attack Syria, to bring the Arabs in to go against Syria, because Israel wants Syria. So does Russia. So does Turkey. So does Iran. So does China. Syria. That's where this is pointing back to. We're moving very quickly towards the destruction overnight of Damascus. These are the matches that have been lit. These are the fuels feeding the fire. Okay? Again, this is where Israel is trying to run their pipeline from Cyprus basically through Greece to Italy and on out to Europe. Something the Russians and the Chinese are not in favor of. Even though the Chinese were willing to build a high-speed rail system in Israel. But their long-term 100-year vision, remember the Chinese are about long vision, not short-term. They were looking at investing in Israel, and they still are, for the purpose of eventually economically controlling Israel. Okay? By 2049. But the Israelis with the short-term vision were willing to take monies to build this rail line. Well, that's now off the table, but China's still moving forward with its Belt Road Initiative. So let's go to that right now. Here are the pipelines. Reviving the Silk Road, announced by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013. The Silk Road Initiative, also known as China's Belt and Road Initiative, aims to invest in infrastructure projects, including railways and power grids in Central, West, and Southern Asia, as well as Africa and Europe. Remember, 2049, 100-year vision. This image here is as of 2015. I'm pointing out to you the gas pipelines on this map. If you will look at the green lines, kind of hard to see in this, but the green line right here where it says Russia, okay, this is a green gas pipeline system being built by China. Remember, Russia politically and financially is in full support of China's Silk Road Initiative, their Belt and Road Initiative. So China wants to build pipelines with the support of Russia and Gazprom into and serving Europe. That flies in the face of what Israel wants to do, to sell natural gas to Europe. Flies in the face of what the Turks want to do, to sell natural gas to Europe. So this is giving you a glimpse into the future of future conflicts surrounding natural gas. 3 principal players. Now, let's go back to Neom. I know I'm jumping around a lot, but these are a lot of dots, a lot of pearls to string together. The purpose of building out Neom by Saudi Arabia was to diversify their income streams. They did not want to be so heavily committed to oil revenues. They wanted to bring in investments into Saudi Arabia to diversify. Saudi Arabia also has natural gas. Saudi Arabia would also like to sell to Europe. So under all of these plans being the theme for tonight's live stream, one layer is natural gas. Another layer is the joining of the religions. And the final focal point is bringing in the beast system, which all of this is the infrastructure of, bringing in the beast system and bringing in their Mashiach, bringing in their Savior, bringing in their single one world leader. So what we are seeing overall from 50,000 feet is the pulling together of the governments of the world. Yes, there are arguments, there is strife going on in the world, but at the highest levels, and we're really talking about at the financial level, this is above elected officials. We're talking about the financial sector. We're talking about the banking community. We are talking about the cryptocurrency community. We are talking about the move towards Libra as the single one world cryptocurrency, rendering obsolete all sovereign currencies under the beast system. So what is not discussed in the mainstream media I'm sharing with you tonight? All of these nations are pulling together. It looks like they're competing. Turkey against Israel, China against Israel, China against Turkey even. And there will be intermediate flashpoints. There will be Damascus. There will be an intermediate in the timeline, flashpoints in the Middle East with Israel. Israel will lose 1 million people in the first exchange, primarily Tel Aviv, as Damascus is destroyed. But moving beyond that, we see all of the nations, all of the leaders, all of the financial leaders pulling together, realizing under their banner of sustainability, global warming, the environment, all of those banners they want to kick around. They are ultimately, from our perspective at 50,000 feet, we can see that it is not so much a fracturing, it is not so much an infighting of nations, but a pulling together. And the pulling together is spiritual. The pulling together is setting the final stones in place for the ushering in and the revealing of the identity of the Antichrist. All of these nations at that higher economic level of leadership, and including their political leaders, are Luciferian. Therefore, they are cooperating. They know who they worship in unison. They all know that each one of them is Luciferian. Therefore, they are not enemies. They are doing what they're doing because they are under the influence of Lucifer. They are being directed by Lucifer. These are the plans of man, but they are the plans of Lucifer himself. But they are not exclusive of God's plans. They are not outside his plans. Remember, Satan is but a tool in the hands of God himself, because God created Satan. Okay? I'd like to stop there, come back on camera with you, because now with all of these jigsaw puzzle pieces laid out, we have to talk about the third temple. The temple will not be built until the restrainer is removed. God doesn't need a building. As we've said many times here, we as the children of God, those that are saved, those who have been justified by the blood shed by Jesus Christ, who is the only way to the Father, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Therefore, the only temple that is necessary, that is recognized by God. And we know that the temple is under assault, DNA and RNA, etc., etc. We know where this is going, but the world does not see it. The world does not know where this is going. They're not given the discernment that is provided through the Holy Spirit. But once that restrainer is removed, then the balance of prophecy, the balance of revelation specifically, begins to unfold. And we are seeing all of those pieces right now. So to replace us as the temple of the Holy Spirit will be the third temple. And this will be on the Temple Mount. And there will be a third temple alongside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So there is this United Arab Emirates Abrahamic Faith Initiative, which is pointing directly at the Temple Mount. And the allowing by the Muslims for the building, the actual physical construction of a temple alongside the mosque on the Temple Mount. And the dialogue about all this, the narrative has been that if the Muslim is allowed to pray, so too is the Jew allowed to pray. And mixed into this is allowing the Christian to pray on the Temple Mount. And so we see the evangelical church in support of Zionist Israel wanting to support the building of a third temple because they want to worship in the Jewish temple. Christians worshiping God in a Jewish temple. That's the sole goal of the leadership. I'm not saying all evangelicals. I'm talking about the leadership like Mike Adams, Rick Warren, John Hagee. Their goal is to bring the evangelical Christians into the Jewish third temple. Well, those are not saved Christians. Those are not children of God. They will not be recognized by God because they will have taken the mark of the beast by that point. Their DNA will have been changed. Their names will no longer be found written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So this is not you and I. And I know there are many evangelical Christians that follow these live streams and read my Entangled magazine. I'm not saying that all evangelicals are going to take the mark of the beast, or all are going to go and worship at the temple, or desire to worship in the temple, or worship in a synagogue. I'm not saying all of them, but the leadership of the evangelical movement of some 7 million people that they claim, that's what they want. But they're denying Jesus Christ. By doing this, by seeking this, they are denying the salvation, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Therefore, I say they are the ones that will be deceived into taking the mark of the beast. They will worship the beast. Can you imagine that? People that profess themselves to be Christian will be worshiping the beast. Because today they are blindly following the Rick Warrens and the following the leadership without studying, without being an independent thinker, without being a critical thinker, and simply taking the word of whom they consider to be somehow wiser, more knowledgeable, somehow perhaps even hearing from God himself. A lot of these guys are false prophets that make false claims. And unfortunately, their followers in the evangelical community are not thinking for themselves. What Kathleen and I are doing are trying through these live streams and through Untitled Magazine to reach out to everyone, but obviously trying to reach out to the evangelical community so that they can see where they are being led to. And literally they are being led like lambs to a slaughter. Their souls are in jeopardy. We're not sitting here in judgment. No, we're trying to warn, we're trying to educate, we're trying to provide information, facts that they can digest and they can come to an understanding as to how they've been misled. So this isn't just about evangelicals. I'm not trying to just make this whole thing about them, but the support of building a third temple, that's antagonistic to God himself. That is saying to God that the sacrifice of his son was of no value. The evidence of that is declining that we, as justified by washed by the blood of Christ, are now the temple. And those that are saying no, there needs to be a temple, a physical building, are specifically denying the salvation of Jesus Christ himself. They don't understand, be they evangelicals, Christians, Arabs, Muslims, even the Buddhists, even the Hindus, all religions, and we got to put the Catholics in there because of the Pope. All the world's religions, and the Pope has been bringing them together since 2017, bringing them together publicly, and they're joining together. So all the world's religions focused on the Temple Mount. That temple, therefore, is being built for the Antichrist, for the image of the beast. And we know from Revelation that the Jewish people will eventually realize the error of their ways and realize that what they did with all of their activities, as well as the rest of the world of unsaved people, have brought in the Antichrist. And they'll realize this is not their true Messiah, but that they have ushered in the era of the Antichrist. But that comes much later. I want to get over to the chat room so I can see it. I'm going to go ahead and put the scripture back up there. And come around to the chat room. Take a quick scan of my notes. Okay. So these are topics that you can dive into in more depth if you choose to. Kind of takes us away from talking so much about COVID-19, talking about all of those related topics and subjects, and takes us up to 50,000 feet this evening to be able to see issues on a bigger scale from a higher perspective. But the focal point of everything I brought to you tonight is the Temple Mount. So as you go forward and you see that Saudi Arabia is joining in a faith-based initiative and other countries are coming together, know that the time is coming very soon for the Antichrist. I don't know if you share with me, and I'm watching the chat room, I don't know if you share with me this sense that the Antichrist is just on the horizon. I'm not one to put, a timeline to be held to. But boy, between September and early next year is going to be a very rough time for the world. Okay? I don't know, and I don't want to be pinned down to this, but it could be, if we use the vaccine that they want to push on the world, and that by President Trump's own statement saying that by January we will have a vaccine, and then the logistics have to be put in place, which is already being done right now, but the logistics being put in place at the final, what they call the last mile for delivery. That last mile of logistics being finalized with the announcement perhaps in January of a vaccine may mean that in the first quarter, the first 3 months of next year, perhaps, somewhere in that first quarter of next year, the Antichrist will be revealed. Now, I back that up by a statement I've repeated for several years, and that is the acceleration, the rate of acceleration of technology, political agendas, religious, faith-based, theological agendas are moving so quickly and being further accelerated in that acceleration. The birth pangs are so close together now. And this upcoming election in November is so pivotal here in the United States. Pivotal for the whole world, not just the U.S. And it doesn't matter who's elected. It's just the fact that there's an election taking place. Doesn't matter if it's Trump. Doesn't matter if it's, Bozo the Clown. It doesn't matter who it is. But the fact that there's an election at this time where we have COVID-19 being used as a stranglehold on the global humanity at this time, the efforts of COVID-19 all surrounding the November election. And for Trump to come out and say January we're going to have a vaccine, well, that tells you that they already have the vaccine and always have had the vaccine. It's just profiteering by all of these pharmaceutical companies and universities. In the meantime, it's all greed. It's all for naught. But I think this is pointing towards sometime in the first 3 months of next year that the Antichrist will be revealed. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's pushed out even further, but it could be that once the election takes place in the United States, chaos will ensue within the United States to such a degree that it will spread like a wildfire around the planet. And in that mix will be the reset, the economic collapse because of the chaos, all planned. I said when Donald Trump was campaigning in 2016 that he was the agent of disruption. And he certainly has been the agent of disruption. And the re-election campaign has been divisive and disrupting. And whether he wins or loses, I think Trump will be re-elected. I do think that he will be re-elected. But it's for a purpose. Every time, this whole thing of Donald Trump and Israel must stay intact. That's why I think he will be reelected. They cannot have the disruption of support for Israel by a new administration coming in. There's no time for a new administration. That's why I believe Donald Trump will be reelected, to maintain the status quo. And once he is, the division in the United States will explode. That explosion will cause an economic collapse of the U.S. and the economy of the world because of the pivotal economic impact of the United States on the rest of the world. Now, the backdrop to the economic collapse with the U.S. is the economic collapse that's going on right now in China because of the floods, and we've covered that extensively, and I'm asking you to continue to pay attention to the floods in China and that economic impact on the supply chains. This is why we've been advising Kathleen and myself for you to buy food, buy food, buy food, because of what's happening in China. What is happening in China, and if the Three Gorges Dam actually collapses, okay, that will be the excuse by the banking elite, the economic elite, to collapse the economy of the world. Concurrent with that is what is happening with the election. I think that the Three Gorges Dam will collapse before the November election. I think it's very close to collapse already. That will precipitate more chaos come November. Then the economic collapse will definitely be in place. Then the reset, and remember I've shared with you from numerous sites, whether it's Rockefeller's or otherwise, they already have in place. I shared with you from BlackRock last week. Since March of this year, BlackRock has put into motion the world's largest asset management company on the planet that is managing the COVID-19 funds that the government gave them. They've already put into action their reset plan. So this whole COVID-19 rides on the back of the plans that have been worked on since 2010, actively since 2010. This reset has been actively planned since 2010. It goes back further, but the actual initiation of the plan started in 2010. So when we talk about plandemic, well, what is that plandemic plan written on? It's written on the reset plan, the economic reset plan. So we have that coming, I think, before January. And I think mixed into that will be the vaccine and the mandating of it in the midst of all the chaos. Remember, problem, reaction, solution. They're going to take full advantage of the chaos. They're not going to allow that opportunity to escape them. And it won't escape them because they planned it. Now, God, as I said in Psalms 37:13, Psalm 2:4, and Proverbs 19:21, God laughs at their plans. He knows the beginning and he knows the end. He knows what's going to happen with their plans. Okay? But these plans are all part of God's plans because they are ultimately resulting in the judgment of those that turn against God, that deny Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, that deny the gift of salvation. Those that continue to deny that, to remain steadfast in their sinful ways, all of this is designed to address them. All of this is targeting them because all of this that we've been talking about results in judgment of them. Not us that are saved. We are pleading for their salvation. We are putting out all this information for the purpose of their salvation, to save as many of, in italics, them. We're already saved. But we are commanded to occupy, and our occupying takes the form of witnessing. Our occupying is to reach out to our fellow humans of any religion, of any culture, black or white. Need I even say that? Reach out with the offer of salvation through Jesus Christ. There is no more important mission in our lives as saved individuals, no more important mission than to spread the gospel. However you're called to do that, whatever manner, whatever mechanism, because you're called to occupy. Okay? Now, I have about a half an hour remaining, and I wanted to leave time tonight because I cut the last live stream on Thursday. I cut it short. And I would like to give you an opportunity to ask questions tonight. Okay? We try to do that in most every live stream, but it doesn't always happen. So please, post in the chat room, or if you choose to, later, go ahead and email me at anthonypatch.com. Use the contact tab at anthonypatch.com, or my email address, anthonypatchauthor, AUTHOR, @gmail.com. I want to just let the general public know, who's going to listen to this live stream in a few days' time, that on the homepage of anthonypatch.com, there are 3 magazine covers from Untitled magazine. June, July, and August. June is the mark of the beast. July is the seal of God. And August, this month's issue, is the abomination that causes desolation, which is focused upon RNA and DNA modification. Those are free. You don't have to subscribe to the magazine. I would love it if you would subscribe. It's only $30 a year, and you have all of the back issues dating back to the founding of Untangled, which was June of 2017. If you choose to join as a patron, you will receive the subscription to the magazine, and you will also have access to the patrons' archives, which is packed full of live streams, articles, postings. There's over 1,500 postings just in the archives, along with our webinars. So anyway, that's just a reminder, not so much a plug as it is a reminder, but please, if you find those free issues, the 3 months of Untangled magazine, to be of value, please share them with other people. Those are witnessing tools. That's why Kathleen and I put those 3 issues out, and why we're making them free to non-subscribers. You can just send the link or send the PDF to people that you want to witness to. This is all about the mark of the beast. That's what is the most relevant. I mean, talking about China, talking about Neom, talking about all these other countries, talking about natural gas pipelines, it can be kind of irrelevant to our personal everyday walk of life. But what is absolutely relevant to each one of us is witnessing. And so we're trying to provide you with witnessing tools if we're able to do that. So I have a question from Andy. Do you think the thermometer to the forehead is to condition people to accept the mark on their forehead? Yeah, it's a way for people to get used to just being scanned. Okay? P.S. was asking, will the signing of the Abrahamic Accord here in the U.S. in September mean anything? Yes, it will, because it's a formal recognition of the joining of the three religions in the United States. The United States, like Israel, so take Israel and replace Israel with the United States, with the Abrahamic Accord. It's the U.S. saying, we acknowledge the three principal religions of the world. If you're a Buddhist or a Hindu, that's a slap in the face. But Islam, Christianity, Judaism, recognized by the United States in September as the joining of the three religions, again goes to the building of the third temple for the worship by those three religions and then all the world's religions on the Temple Mount. So that accord in September is all about the building of the third temple. Okay? All right, let's see what we have here. So again, Andy's question about the forehead you guys are talking about in the chat room. You'll recall that the microneedle array patch that delivers the quantum dots, delivers the luciferase quantum dots that fluoresces by way of an application and a filter on a smartphone. And it's not so much that it is broadcasting a near-infrared beam of light onto the forehead or onto the right hand. What actually is happening, and I want you to pay attention to this, the luciferase quantum dots are radiating, they are transmitting a near-infrared wavelength of light in the color spectrum. And it is that radiation of that near-infrared waveband that is filtered by the smartphone so that all it sees is the near-infrared transmission in the electromagnetic spectrum. Transmission or emission from those quantum dots just under the surface of the skin. That emission of light that is near infrared, you can't see it with the naked eye, it's not visible to the naked eye, but it's visible to the phone. So Andy, when you're talking about using a digital thermometer to scan the forehead, that's getting people used to that type of situation where they will be scanned, is absolutely correct. It is conditioning. Okay? Mr. Wilson, will the vaccine be dormant initially and then be activated by 5G? Yes. If it causes issues immediately, then no one will want it. Maybe they will throw the switch to boot up the robots. Okay. To boot up the robots, the nanobots, throw the switch. Yes. This is why 5G is being rolled out, why it's being accelerated in its rollout, because 5G is the mechanism by which it will activate the dormant nanoparticles delivered by the quantum dots. The quantum dots, by definition, are nanoparticles. They are in the scale of a billionth of a meter, so they are around 10 to 12 to 14 nanometers in size, those quantum dots. By definition, they are nanoparticles. They will be activated because there is a built-in antenna for receiving as well as transmitting. And you guys will recall from the pages of Entangled magazine that these quantum dots have the ability to function as a biosensor. So they are collecting data, biological data, from our bodies and even from our minds. Okay? They're not reading our thoughts, but our state of mind. If we're anxious, we're afraid, or we're happy, or whatever, it's picking that up. And we've shared the patents, many of which Mr. Wilson sent to me, patents that back me up on the quantum dot system function as a biosensor. So it is collecting data from the body and transmitting that by way of 5G. 5G is able to receive that information from the quantum dots and transmit it into the cloud. It's a two-way form of communication with a person's body. And the triggering that Mr. Wilson was bringing up is when a specific signal, and I said this back in 2013, dormant nanoparticles will be triggered by an electromagnetic signal. That's what I said in 2013. You guys have all seen that video of me. This is what 5G is built for, to trigger those nanobots. And what do the nanobots do when they trigger? They begin to change the DNA. So it's not so much the vaccine, and again, I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to say. Okay? Set the vaccine itself aside and focus on the quantum dots. The quantum dots are the mechanism by which the vaccine is able to change the RNA and change the DNA. The quantum dots are the machinery that allows the vaccine, which from the research I've shared with you will be either a DNA-based, but more than likely will be a messenger RNA, an mRNA-based vaccine, by way of the quantum dots delivering the messenger RNA to the cells. The messenger RNA will penetrate the cell membrane, move through the fluid cytoplasm to the shell of the nucleus, penetrate the shell of the nucleus, thus contacting the host DNA and then modifying the host DNA permanently. That's when a person is no longer found written in the book of life. Their names do not. And as I shared with you in the last live stream, one of our patrons put forth the question, the conjecture that I shared with you, and that is, perhaps our names are written in our DNA. Perhaps the genomic sequence of our DNA, perhaps the specific pattern of DNA that is individual for every person. Every person has a unique genomic sequence to their DNA. That perhaps that arrangement of the nucleotides represented by letters actually spells out the name that God wrote before we were born. And once that genomic sequence, those letters are shuffled by way of the triggering of the quantum dots, delivering the messenger RNA into the DNA within the nucleus of the cells of every cell of the body. Perhaps because the DNA is shuffled, the name is shuffled. Thus, the name is no longer found in the Lamb's Book of Life because it's not the original name. It's a misspelling. I think that's a fascinating insight, and that's why I'm repeating it to you tonight, because I think it really does work that way. You guys know that Kathleen and I have looked at all of this DNA and RNA mechanism, not just related to COVID, but certainly specific to COVID, all this year, and shared it with you. We know enough that we understand, and we've shared with you the doctors that have even reported that the host DNA is permanently changed by the vaccine. That it makes sense. The DNA is changed. Well, we'll go deeper. It's changing the genomic sequence. It's changing the arrangement of the nucleotides of DNA and RNA. And when it does that, it rewrites our names. I think that's a great way to sum up all of the scientific literature that we've been sharing with you, all of the scientific scenarios related to the vaccine research. It is a rewriting of our names. Remember, DNA is the data storage, it's the memory bank, while RNA is the workhorse, is the operating system. RNA produces DNA. RNA is the front line. Okay? And everything that needs to be stored in our data memory is stored in the DNA. So we're seeing a shuffling of not just the DNA, but we're seeing a shuffling of the RNA concurrently by way of this microneedle array delivering quantum dots that fluoresce in a pattern of fluorescent colors that is specific to an individual person. An individual's identity will be detected by a smartphone because there is a specific pattern of quantum dots for each individual person on the planet. It's, if you think about pastel colors and how infinite they are in their mixing, in their hues of pastels, that's what luciferase does. A slightly different pattern of pastel colors under the skin. Okay, Mr. Wilson's asking a question. Will a 3D printer be used to create 3D life forms by printing DNA patterns? Evil days of Noah and chimeras. Yes, in fact, right now, in talking about chimeras, in the research for the vaccines, they are talking about vaccines produced by creating chimeras, the definition of which is the mixing of animal and plant DNA with human DNA. Animal and plant DNA with human DNA in this search for a vaccine. That's right out of the literature. So the first part of the question was, will a 3D printer be used to create 3D life forms by printing DNA patterns? Yes, because going back to Dr. Craig Venter and his presentation to NASA back in 2015, he presented to NASA that they have already proven the ability to digitize DNA, therefore transmit the digital signal through the internet to another laboratory that has a DNA sequencer and a 3D bioprinter, and take that digitized DNA, run it through a 3D bioprinter, which has the nucleotides, the building blocks of DNA, as its printing ink, and they proved, this was a speech to NASA engineers, proved that they could print out a replica of the original biological sample that they just transmitted digitally through the internet to another lab. And so he said to NASA, rather than having human astronauts, you could have very small rockets, very small spaceships that would contain the nucleotides, contain the genomic sequence, a sequence that was specifically created in the laboratory so that the life form from that DNA that was 3D printed when the spaceship landed on another planet or another star, this is Dr. Craig Venter saying this, you can look it up, that the DNA would then be 3D bioprinted once it arrived on a planet, and you would grow your own astronauts on that planet. Of course, they would send everything that was necessary for sustaining life, but he emphasized that the DNA would be modified. It would be artificially arranged such that those astronauts were better, biologically, better equipped for that environment that they'd just been deposited on. Okay? So the ability here on Earth to 3D bioprint a living life form already exists. And Dr. Craig Venter revealed it back in 2015. Talk about the image of the beast in that conversation. Okay? They can bioprint. So let's talk just briefly about something we've mentioned in the past, and that is Dr. Geordie Rose from D-Wave, who founded Sanctuary, along with another doctor from D-Wave, which is Dr. Suzanne Gildert. And Sanctuary, sanctuary.ai is the website. You have to have a password to get into their website, but there's articles about there and YouTube videos where they have given interviews. Dr. Suzanne Gildert, Gildert, has talked about and promoted the fact that at sanctuary.ai they are creating synths. They call them synths, synthetic life forms, indistinguishable from humans by their own proclamation, not by my saying so. Okay? And when they first presented this back in 2016, and I presented it to you, they, meaning Geordie Rose, Dr. Suzanne Gildert, said that they would be producing synthetic life forms indistinguishable from a human. I said then they have to do it biologically. They have to do it through 3D bioprinting, which is probably why their website, when you go to their landing page, you have to have at sanctuary.ai a password to get into their website. And they don't talk about it much anymore. Okay? Biological 3D printing. Not science fiction. Been around for over 15 years now. Look it up in the literature. Okay? Okay, did I miss any questions in the chat room? We have about 10 minutes and I'd be happy to take questions. It's cooler tonight than it was in the last live stream. I had to cut it short because it was so hot and I had to close the windows. That was actually on Friday, because Friday I didn't realize how noisy it was around here compared to Thursday evenings. So we're going to stick to Thursday. So our broadcast schedule for the public that's listening later: Sunday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time each week. And those are all in the archives. If you join as a patron, you have full access to all those. Big shout out to Josh. Josh is in the chat room tonight. I forgot to send you an email thank you. So Josh, thank you very much for putting together the latest live streams into an outline. Josh did this once before a couple of months ago. He organized all the live streams into a outline form in the archives for the patrons, so they're easily searchable. He's done that since that first outline. He's updated it. So if you haven't noticed, patrons, there's a new outline within the archives for all of you to be able to find the topics of interest within all of these live streams that we've done. Okay, question from Julie. What role has Switzerland in all this? Is it about Cern? Well, interesting. Switzerland has two things going on of note that I can think of off the top of my head. One, they are the home for the brain mapping initiative. Remember the human genome mapping, which again was Dr. Craig Venter. It was his genome, the first human genome fully sequenced was Dr. Craig Venter's. Well, right after that in Switzerland, they began the brain mapping. That's the mapping of all the neurons in Switzerland. That's not necessarily connected to CERN, but it is connected to what we're doing, what we're talking about here, the brain mapping. The other is Dr. George Church. Again, just off the top of my head memory. Type in Dr. George Church, because this has to do with artificial intelligence and the connecting of human brains to AI. And he's also related to MIT and Harvard, Dr. George Church. That's connected into Switzerland. But let's talk about Cern real quickly. Cern is, its sole purpose really is, as you know, is for the opening of the doorway to the abyss. That's why they're located on the ancient Roman temple site to Abaddon, Apollyon, the destroyer. Now, their high luminosity collisions will not take place until 2026, according to their schedule. But lower power, not high luminosity, but lower luminosity power collisions will happen between now and 2026. It is conceivable, and if you look at the video that they put out called Symmetry, they put out a video in 2016 from Cern, their own video, their own production, called Symmetry. That's borrowed from particle physics, but the point here is symmetry. At the end of their own video, they showed the Large Hadron Collider running out of control, exploding, the machine exploding underground, and opening the portal to the abyss. They showed it in their own video from Cern. Now, it may be difficult to find that video again because about a year after they first published it on YouTube, they took it down. There may be people that downloaded it. I unfortunately did not download Symmetry at the time. I thought they would just leave it up, so I didn't think there would be any reason to download it. But I'm sure there are places that have mirrored that video on YouTube, and you'd be able to find Symmetry from Cern. Just type that in. You'll find the promo, you'll find the trailer, you can find still images through a Google search for images on Symmetry, and you'll get the gist of it, okay? But it's fascinating. I think that long before 2026, when they open the doorway to the abyss, it's going to come as a result of the purposeful destruction of the collider. Meaning they're going to run it up beyond its limits in the colliding of particles. And I have, in my own calculation, determined that they need 20 peta-electron volts as a result of colliding heavy ions of lead in order to open the doorway to the abyss. Okay? Lynette is asking, have you ever considered opening up a Patreon Discord so we can all chat in that private group? No, I haven't, Lynette. The reason I think is because Discord would not be a public chat like we have here on the YouTube. I know that when this YouTube video is posted later and made public, the chat is no longer visible. And I think that would be the same thing with Discord, because Discord's on a different platform than YouTube, and therefore chat would not be visible. Now that's probably a good thing. I think most of us would rather keep the chat private and not have it out there in the public domain. But I don't know if it would provide any additional privacy on Discord beyond what we are experiencing here on YouTube, because this YouTube video right now, as you know, is unlisted. Okay? People could find it if they knew enough to go looking for it. It's not a private video in that sense, where you need to be invited by providing a link. But I'll look at Discord. Lynette, I will look at Discord, and I'll talk it over with Doug Diamond from Diamond Digital Media, who keeps everything running here, and see if there's any advantage to using Patreon Discord, okay? But you can email me and fill me in on it as well. Alrighty. Let's see. Lynette says it is a private chat where only your Patreons would be in the chat. It's just a nice place for your patrons to connect all week. Oh, I see what you're saying. Beyond the live streams, it's a chat room. Okay. Well, let me look at it. If it is a place that is open just to the patrons, as you say it is, and I'm sure it is, and it's a place that could be unmoderated because Kathleen and I would not be there to moderate that chat room as we are here, with the live stream. As long as, everybody abided by, the basic premise of being nice to each other in that chat room, and we didn't have personal attacks and fights and, things going on that are inappropriate, I think it's a good idea. So I will look at it. I promise you, I will look at it. Sheila is saying Marfugal News lost Discord with having so many people. Yeah, see, that's why we keep the chat room unlisted, why we keep it private, because if we made these live streams on YouTube public at the time that we're running them, it would be a disaster in the chat room. All right, Sector 16 is asking, is there a connection between the Bronze Age Silk Road and today's new China Silk Road? Yeah, there is, only in name, really. Some of the pathways in the Bronze Age, the pathways are being retraced in the China Silk Road, which is now they're calling it the new Silk Road, in essence. It's following, but it's extending that Silk Road, really to encompass the entire planet. That's their goal by 2049, is to extend the Silk Road around the planet, which also, not in the Bronze Age was this found, but today they are extending the Silk Road into the Arctic, the North Pole, and eventually into the South Pole as well. So the Arctic regions they are bringing into the new Silk Road. China is. Okay? Alrighty, so we're almost to the end here. Alright. Alrighty, so the Discords Lynette is saying she belongs to are all afflicted with other patrons I support, and nothing has ever been censored in our group. We talk about all the topics that YouTube censors. Okay. Well, that sounds like a good place to be. And the fact that it's running outside of the live streams. You guys have a chance to continue to... oh, I see. Afflicted was affiliated. Okay. I'm being literal there, Lynette. Sorry. At any rate, let's go ahead and we'll conclude for the evening here. And let me get back on camera. I thank you for your patience with the technical issues on the software at the beginning. And I hope tonight was beneficial, that it was interesting for you. I hope it's a springboard for further research to go out and take a look at what China is doing. Again, pay attention to Lebanon and their change of administration, how that's going to affect Israel and how that's going to affect the gas pipelines. And again, that's a match that's been lit. All of that's going to lead towards Damascus, while at the same time these initiatives, which will roll in I think next with Saudi Arabia joining the Abrahamic Faith-Based Initiative, and then September we have, as someone in chat brought up, the September Faith-Based Initiative, Abrahamic Initiative in the United States in September. That will follow Saudi Arabia. But this is all pointing towards bringing everybody to the focal point of building the third temple, combining all of the religions at the Temple Mount, and that will bring in and reveal the Antichrist, the identity of the Antichrist. Because they all want the same thing. They want Lucifer to be successful. They want the Antichrist government. So when they come together on the Temple Mount, when they come together to build the temple, and I think the temple will be 3D printed. Mr. Wilson was talking about 3D bioprinters. I've said for a long time, I believe that the temple will be 3D printed with 3D printing construction techniques. They've been around for years, building buildings with 3D printers. I'm not talking about a desktop. I'm talking about construction size machinery, industrial machinery, 3D printing building blocks to build the temple, and they can build it in short order. Okay? So again, things are being accelerated. Things are moving along very quickly. And in that whole mix, we have the economic collapse, the reset, Libra cryptocurrency, problem, reaction, solution. That's what that entails, and the revealing of the Antichrist, and then the mark of the beast with the vaccine and the microneedle array delivered quantum dots. So there's a lot that is being packed into the next several months. Over the next 6 months, an awful lot is going to change in this world. No reason to be fearful. We are all saved. We are all children of God. We are to reach out, present the gospel, the good news of the gospel to others for their salvation. So God bless you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patronage. And if you're here in New Hampshire, live free or die. Good night.